We're going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Matt McCallum, and I'd like to welcome all of you and those of you that are watching the live stream today. This event has been planned and executed by a bunch of grassroots citizens just like myself that cherish our God-given inalienable rights and the liberties enshrined in our founding documents. So, Kirsten, John, April, Paul, and Barb, thank you very much for all the time and effort. On an administrative note, the restrooms are through this double door and to your left, and the emergency exits are the one you came in through, and also immediately through that double door. I would ask each of you to check your cell phones and make sure the volume is off, and when we're done, or you can come up as people are talking, there's sample ballots, exactly what you're going to see when you go vote on August 2nd up here, so you can review the exact verbiage on the ballot. And then there's some historical data there as well. I would really like to thank Pastor Ed Meese and the St. Paul Lutheran Church for hosting our event free of charge. Because when I say we're grassroots, that also means our funding, meaning we have none. So it takes a special pastor and congregation to host an event like this, and for that we're very thankful. Thank you, sir. I especially want to thank these panel members because we spent countless hours on the phone, via email, text, and face-to-face trying to assemble this panel. And we just locked in Representative Johnson, I think it was 3 days ago. But we started a month ago. So what we found in that long duration was it's one thing to have an opinion, it's an entirely another to appear on this stage today. It takes a confident, resolute person to get on stage and discuss this issue in public and on camera. Your perspectives will most likely cause some attendees to rethink some of their positions or do more research prior to casting their vote on August 2nd. That is our sole purpose today, is just to aid undecided voters in making an informed decision on August 2nd. So please give these panel members a round of applause. Now, ask if you'd like to recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And now, Pastor Ed Meese is going to give the invitation for our event.
Thank you, Mac. I might just clarify, the restroom directions are pretty close, but we're kind of torn apart in cleaning for the summer. I think the signs are down. So the first restroom is the men's. Ladies is just down the hall. If you only open the door once you make a turn, it's also not labeled, but that's the ladies' restroom. So I see things are kind of torn apart anyway for the new school year, and so I just noticed some of those signs aren't where they're supposed to be yet. So that's how you get there. Let's bow our heads. Heavenly Father, as we gather here this afternoon, it is in gratitude for your gracious blessing upon our nation, where we the people enjoy divinely endowed freedoms and liberties. You've truly given us your providence and protection from our founding until today. As we come together to become better informed in the lives we live as citizens of America, we recall the wisdom of Isaiah 1, where it is written, "Come, let us reason together." We recall the promise of Psalm 133, where we are assured of how pleasant it is when we live together in unity. And Lord, we confess before you that we are very much unified in our nation and even in our state. We take hope in your word in 2 Chronicles that we will humble ourselves, seek after you, and turn from our wicked ways. You will heal our land. We turn to you this very day, seeking healing, seeking unity, seeking your continued blessing upon us, that we in turn might be a blessing to the nations and peoples of this world. Be with us now, especially with those who are providing information regarding the value of the Milk Amendment proposed to our Kansas State Constitution. Give them, indeed give each of us, a spirit of calmness, a clear mind, a willingness to learn. When we cast our votes in this primary election, of utmost priority would be the decision to follow your will for us. We ask these things, confident that you hear and answer prayers brought to you in faith, praying in the name of Jesus Christ, your only Son and our only Savior. Amen.
Amen.
Another administrative note, these panel members graciously agreed to answer, and I negotiated with them up to 6 questions after the event via email that we will post to our website if we don't get through all the questions today. We'll get them out to them this evening with the suspense of Tuesday late, so we can have them up for a week for the voting public. So that's very good on their part. My last thank you and introduction is for our moderator, Mr. Mike Powell. Our scheduled moderator couldn't participate due to family reasons, and Mr. Powell accepted this task on less than 2 days' notice. He's not a member of our group, but a concerned citizen who sees the value in the event we planned, and he currently serves as the vice president of the Leavenworth School Board. So, Mr. Powell, thanks for volunteering your services on such short notice. The floor is yours.
Well, first of all, we're going to lower this down. This is just amazing to see all of you here today. I mean, it just speaks to the importance of this discussion and what we're getting ready to do when we go to the ballot box. So I want to thank we the people of Leavenworth for organizing this, and I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate. This isn't something that was taken on as a challenge. This was an honor to be able to work with these panel members and try to inform the public. So it's good the public's here. So thank you all so much for coming. Now what we're going to do is, we've had the administrative remarks. We're going to, just quickly introduce the panel. They'll get an opportunity here in a minute to talk about themselves. And I'll give a little background after that has to do with how we got here, as well as then give you the verbiage of the amendment, because words have meaning. And then we'll go right into their opening remarks based on some leading questions, and we'll go from there. We do intend to try to incorporate time for questions from this group. It'll probably be pretty limited. We're not going to get to all of your questions, but like Max said, if we can, we'll forward them on to the panel members here and have them address it later. So, Mac, anything else administratively along those lines?
All 5 of the 6 panel members have agreed to stay after to answer any of your questions. If you want to approach them, Representative Johnson has prior engagement, and then he has to get out of here right at 4 o'clock. So feel free to engage them while they're here this afternoon.
Okay, so we'll go right into, we have Mr. Teresa Woody, we have Mr. Harry Schwartz, we have Mr. Pat Proctor, Mr. Tim Johnson, and we have Jared Burdick and Drake Chapman. So that's our panel. I'll give them time to explain who they are here in a minute. But what I want to do first of all is kind of set the conditions, set the stage for how did we get here. This is just a short historical survey of Kansas abortion law. It's not absolutely complete with everything in it, but it's a pretty good summary. In 1997, the Kansas legislature passed the Women's Right to Know Act, and this required, in exceptions of medical emergency, a 24-hour period between time the woman is informed that she would, in writing, legally, and to have legally required information about the abortion. So it's a 24-hour waiting period. Then the state passed a law in the early 2000s banning abortions at 22 weeks based on the theory that a fetus can feel pain at that point in development. In 2013, the state targeted regulation of abortion providers law. It applied to medication-induced abortions and addressed the medical practices of both private doctor offices and, in addition, abortion clinics. So it basically established medical standards for it. The Kansas lawmakers approved HB 2253 on April 6, 2013 that says life begins at fertilization, forbids abortion based on gender, and bans Planned Parenthood from providing sex education in schools. Then as we move forward into 2015, Kansas became the first state to ban dilation evacuation procedure, a common second trimester abortion procedure. But the new law was later struck down by the Kansas Court of Appeals in January 2016 without ever having gone into effect. Then that leads us right into April 2019, where the Kansas Supreme Court affirmed the lower court's decision and ruled that the right to an abortion is inherent within the state's Constitution and Bill of Rights, such that even if Roe v. Wade was overturned and the federal protection of abortion rights was withdrawn, the right would still be allowed within Kansas, barring a change in the state constitution. In mid-May 2019, state law banned abortion after week 22. In 2019, women in Kansas were given eligible pregnancy accommodation and pregnancy-related temporary disability as a result of abortion or miscarriage if their employer had 4 more employees. Employers were required to offer unpaid leave upon request, and employees could not be punished for requesting it. And then, of course, we know the last event that occurred was June the 24th, 2022, the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization on the grounds that the substantive right to abortion was not deeply rooted in this nation's history or tradition, nor considered a right in the Due Process Clause was ratified in 1868 and was unknown in U.S. law until Roe. So that's just a quick summary. So there was a road getting here. But we also think that it was important for all of us to start with an understanding of what the actual ballot constitutional amendment says. So I read directly. And oh, by the way, this is also on the sample ballot that's up here to be able to read. Because Kansans value both women and children, the Constitution of the state of Kansas does not require government funding of abortion and does not create or secure a right to abortion. To the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States, the people, through their elected state representatives and state senators, may pass laws not limited to laws that account for circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape or incest, or circumstances of necessity to save the life of the mother. And that concludes the amendment to the Constitution. Now, with that, I'll go ahead and open it up to kind of keep this moving to each of you. So, Jared, if you would start on this side in just 1 minute. Just do a quick introduction before you're here.
Great. Well, thank you to everybody who comes out to this and for we the people of Leavenworth County for putting this event on. My fellow panelists, I'm honored to be here today and hope to help with the deciding factors on this vote. So my name is Jared Burdick. I am from St. George, Kansas, which is just a little town east of Manhattan. I am representing a ministry of our church called AIM-KS. AIM stands for Abortion is Murder. It is our position biblically that to take the life of an innocent child is in fact murder, and that life begins at the point of fertilization, as I'm sure we'll get to later in this debate. Our ministry's aim is a little bit different than what a typical pro-life aim is. We are an abolitionist organization, which can be summarized by saying that we believe abortion must be abolished immediately without exception or compromise. If you have any questions about it, we have a table back there with some literature and resources, and of course I'll be here afterwards to answer any questions I can. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Chapman, please.
Yeah, I'm Drake Chappie. I'm from the Clay Center area, which is central north part of Kansas. I'm here to weigh in on it. I mostly know about the Constitution, federal and state. That's pretty much where my expertise lies, such as it is. I take the stance that this amendment is worded poorly and it's the complete wrong way to go about solving the issue of the bogus ruling of the court in 2019.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, and I appreciate that you are here. Tim Johnson is my name. I spent 31 years in the criminal justice field, the final years in child abuse cases. I had a good graduate degree in forensic science, so familiar with a lot of those issues. Retired and went to teaching for a number of years until I was elected to the House of Representatives just 2 years ago. And I still, in the fall, I substitute teach at a couple of the Lutheran education centers. I'm a strong advocate. I am an elder in a Lutheran community church in the Baser area, and I have a children's message. I was specifically recruited to run as a conservative and to support the value then vote amendment, and I did that. And so there are a lot of options, and I hope to have a chance to share some of those things.
So thank you, Mike. Thank you, we the people of Leavenworth County. Thank you to St. Paul's Lutheran for hosting this event today. My name is Pat Proctor. I serve the people of Leavenworth, Fort Leavenworth, and Kickapoo Township in the Kansas State House in Topeka. So welcome to our district if you're from out of town. Before I was a state representative, I served 25 years in the Army, including 2 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan. I was honored to do that because I was defending our rights. I was defending our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. More than that, I was defending our right to life, including for the unborn. I also was defending our way of government, which holds that elected officials, not unelected judges or bureaucrats, should be making decisions that affect all our lives. And so when I got to Topeka for my first term last year, I was honored that one of the first votes I was able to take was to give you the opportunity to vote on the Value in Both Amendment here on August 2nd. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is Harry Schwartz, candidate for the 1st District, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here to be an advocate for pro-choice, for freedom, liberties, unalienable rights that our Constitution gives us. I am not pro-abortion. I don't envy any woman or child that has to go through an abortion. I have a personal story that I have permission to share that I will share with you later. The amendment is merely more evidence of the chance for our elected officials here in Kansas to take away choice and rights. That's what this is really about. This is more of a power grab than it is anything else. There's already common sense legislation in place. There's laws that doctors have to file. Yes, there are 2 that are currently up with the judicial system that are being worked and that are probably being put on hold because of this. I don't know for sure. But that's what this is about. This is about freedom, choice, liberties, and unalienable constitutional rights that we were granted. Thank you.
Hi, I echo the thanks to everybody for making this forum possible. My name is Teresa Woody. I am an attorney. I've been in trial practice for over 30 years in the Kansas and Missouri area. I am currently the Director of Litigation at the Kansas Appalachian Center for Law and Justice, but I'm not here under that hat today. I have volunteered for women's health and women's reproductive rights for decades, and I'm one of the team of lawyers in the Hodes case where the Supreme Court of Kansas said that personal autonomy in the Kansas Constitution extends to the rights of women and families to make choices about giving birth, about being pregnant, about when and if they want to have children. And so I'm here today to urge you to vote no on this amendment on August 2nd.
Thank you. Now we'll turn to your actual opening remarks. You'll have 3 minutes. And the question that we'd like you to start with is why should Kansans vote yes or no on the Value in Both Amendment? But we would also like for you, within your answer, in an effort for the audience to better understand you and your position, please explain when, in your position, human life begins and how that might affect your stance on the issues and the amendment. And we'll start with, if you would, Jared.
All right, I guess I get to start. So yes, it is our position, both mine personally and my organization AIM, that we would recommend everyone vote no. As I said, we are an anti-abortion ministry. I know, got some posters in the record that. Our position isn't because we want to see more abortion, it's because we do not want to regulate abortion as health care. We have done that in this country for over 50 years, and we've done that here in our state for the last 50 to 25, and that's wrong. If we as pro-life Republican Christians say that life begins at the point of fertilization or conception, and they are fully human, then we have to extend them the full constitutional rights that they bear. The Constitution states clearly that nobody can be deprived of their right to life. And so the other arguments on the opposing side are often that they are trying to obtain or defend their life, their rights to freedom and liberty. You can defend your right to freedom and liberty, but you cannot do so at the expense of another U.S. citizen's right to life. And so that's really where the core question comes down, is where does life begin? It is our position that life begins at fertilization. And I am unashamed of the fact that I say that is based upon God's word. He says that He knits us together in the womb. It is at that point that we are made. At the point of fertilization, there is a unique DNA to that person, human DNA. It is not just a clump of cells or a blob of tissue. It is a human being at the earliest stage of development. And we should not be prejudicial against any people just because they're at a lower stage of development. Just because kids have not hit puberty yet and they're not fully developed in every biological sense doesn't mean they're any less human. Just because a baby is an infant and dependent upon its parents doesn't mean it's any less human, right? And so one of the fundamental questions that we all have to answer to be consistent on this issue is really, is there any difference between a child inside the womb and outside the womb? And then furthermore, should we support legislation that just merely regulates whether or not that child can live? That's the position we need to have. If we're going to say it's murder, if we're going to say it's wrong, then we have to be consistent about that. What does consistency look like? It doesn't look like regulating it like healthcare. It doesn't look like trying to pass legislation that cares about how wide the medical facilities hallways are, or whether or not they have cockroaches in the room, or whether or not you can kill a baby at 22 weeks, or 15 weeks, or 8 weeks. It says we state that life begins at fertilization, and we are going to extend the rights to them completely. It's also necessary to know that current Kansas criminal statutes state that life begins at fertilization. The legislative declaration that life begins at fertilization, they already stated that the life of each human being begins at fertilization. And unborn children have interests in life, health, and well-being that should be protected. Now, that's the current criminal statute on the books. The issue is that we go past that and we make an exception and say that you can actually have an abortion. Life begins at fertilization, but then we go further and we murder those children by depriving them of their
Mr.
life.
Burke, this time, thank you.
All right, so my biggest problem with this amendment, and the reason why I'm voting no on it, is because our founders made it clear when they set up our republic that the legislative branch necessarily predominates. That's what James Madison said. And then the other two powers are there to put a check on the legislature. And of course, we have the fundamental duties of each branch. The executive branch enforces the law, the legislative branch makes the law, and the judicial branch adjudicates the law. They hear cases, they determine whether or not the parties broke the law that the legislative branch passed and the executive branch enforces. They don't legislate from the branch. They can give their opinion on constitutionality of the laws that have been passed by the legislature, but so can the legislature, so can the executive branch. The 2019 ruling that because of a mother's right to liberty or pursuit of happiness, she has the right to take away her child's right to life, her unborn child's right to life, it's idiotic. It's obvious. It's an obvious violation, and it can be brought up on charges of violating an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. It's a violation of the very first right listed in the Kansas Bill of Rights, which is the right to life, similar to our Declaration. It says right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Secondly, we don't need an amendment to give our legislators, our lawmakers, the right to make laws. That they're already passing legislation on abortion. They've passed legislation since this ruling in 2019 on abortion. It's at the least an unnecessary amendment.
What is legal is not always moral. I think that's something that I have always taught my students in my criminal justice classes. We have laws that many of us would disagree with and say our morality opposes this. We base it on our culture, our education, our culture, and economics. And what is reasonable in one region is not the same consensus in another. We know that in a constitutional republic, we have to allow individual regions to govern themselves within reason. We have states. We have smaller governing bodies. And the reason we think this is so important is because our regions have these different values. Roe versus Wade, in my opinion, says that. They're saying it is up to each state to determine their response to the abortion issue. Not that abortion is of itself illegal. The value in both amendments is therefore a very reasonable effort by Kansas governing body to allow democracy to take place. A democratic vote will determine how our state feels on this specific issue. I personally believe that a life begins at conception, and then I have my heart torn apart as I think back to the cases I've worked in the criminal justice systems with rape and incest and the importance of protecting the life of the mother. I have trouble sleeping at night on that issue now. I hope that possibly through religious consultation I can come to a conclusion. That is so important. I know one of the other speakers on this podium works very hard in the state of Kansas to help causes on abortion, foster care, and adoption. And so I looked at that as a possible answer to those issues, and it's going to be a tough wrestle with those issues. Thank you.
Representative Proctor?
Thank you. If you don't hear anything else that I say today, please take these things home with you. First, if you want any limits at all on the practice of abortion in the state of Kansas, you've got to vote yes. And if I've got folks over here that are going to tell you they're against it because it's not a ban. I got folks over here who are going to tell you that they're against it because it is a ban. This doesn't ban abortion. All this does is take us back to April 2019 before this disastrous Supreme Court decision. Now you're going to hear from one side that there are 25 laws that are in effect already for abortion. Well, 2 of them have already been stricken down and the other 23 cannot be enforced. And so before we get into all the legalese, let me begin. This is the Supreme Court decision from 2019 that found the right to an abortion, the fundamental right to an abortion in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in the state constitution. It says that those rights allow a woman to make her own decision regarding her body, health, family formation, and family life. Decisions that can include whether to continue a pregnancy. That's page 3. Page 4. The most searching of these standards, strict scrutiny, applies when a fundamental right is implicated. And then page 72, under the strict scrutiny standard, the state faces a high burden. Once a plaintiff proves an infringement, regardless of degree, the government's action is presumed unconstitutional. Presumed unconstitutional. So right now, Planned Parenthood is still following this rule so that they can create the illusion that the other 23 rules are in effect. Mark my words. If we don't vote yes on the value of both amendment, if this amendment fails, every one of those 23 laws is going to be stricken down, and we're going to be an unlimited abortion state. So please ignore the signs out there that say stop the ban, vote no, because there is no ban. Nobody's banning anything. This just takes us back to April 2019, restores your rights as Kansans through us, your legislators, to regulate the abortion industry, to pass laws about abortion, just like we do every other industry in this state. Thank you.
Mr. Schwartz.
The reason I'm voting no is because the Bill of Rights of our Kansas State Constitution offer us the ability to total body autonomy. Okay? That's male and female. If we get a vote yes on this, what we're looking at is we're looking at our representatives writing laws for us to determine what we can and can't do. And that's not just women, that's men too. This could happen. I have 4 daughters, and the last thing I want them to not have is safe, clean health care. As you heard, there's the different laws out there that can't be enforced. Guess what? They can be enforced and are being enforced. So don't believe the rhetoric or the political talking points that we're become accustomed to out here. We need to keep in mind that this vote no keeps things the way they are. Common sense legislation is already in place. Okay? Nobody wants to get an abortion. Nobody wants to have to go through that. Okay? Real quick. My daughters wouldn't have a mother if it wasn't for this procedure. I had to make that choice. My wife and I had to make that choice together. And we had to figure out what we were going to do. Do my daughters need another brother or sister, or do they need a mother? And they need a mother. And by voting yes on this, you take away that ability for them to have a mother. Because she can't make that choice. Because our legislators and our representatives are making that choice for them. That is why I'm voting no. Freedom, choice, and liberty.
Let me start out by saying that the Hodes case was determined by the Supreme Court 3 years ago. And in that entire 3 years, the only two abortion regulating statutes that have been struck down are one that was struck down more than 12 years ago that said that you had to have an ambulatory surgical center in order to provide an abortion, when you can go and get the same procedure at your gynecologist if you're not pregnant and not have to have that regulated. So it was trying to make it impossible for providers to provide any kind of abortion health care. The other one is the D&C statute, which was the center of the Hodes case, in which the Kansas legislature precluded women from having a D&C, which is the safest form of an abortion in the second trimester. And what that would do, now 85% of the abortions that happen in Kansas happen well before 12 weeks of pregnancy. The abortions that happen later are usually the case where it is a wanted pregnancy, but there is either a serious issue to the health of the mother, or the child has serious issues in the womb that make them incompatible with life or quality of life. So those are typically decisions that nobody wants to face. And what the D&C statute did is it put those women at risk. And mark my words, no matter what these folks say, if this amendment passes, the first thing they're going to do next session is ban abortion. And they're going to ban it in cases of rape and incest, because that constitutional amendment gives them the right to make any regulations they want regarding pregnancy and abortion, and even in cases of rape, incest, or the health and life of the mother. So you're going to see that ban. They don't want to admit it, but it was already introduced last session. There was one that also criminalized the abortion for the mother and the doctor. That's what you're going to see if this abortion passes. If this abortion doesn't pass, things are going to stay the same way they are. You're going to have abortions that are regulated by the state, and there are all kinds of regulations, parental consent, counseling, ultrasounds beforehand. The state of Kansas already doesn't allow public funds to be used for abortion. That's already on the law. None of those have been challenged in the last 3 years since the Hodes decision happened. And that decision allows the state to regulate abortion. Don't be fooled by saying that it doesn't. It allows the state to regulate abortion as long as the state has a compelling interest that's narrowly that.
All right, well, for the first question, you have the microphone. We'll let you begin this team. As we probably don't know, they're somewhat organized in teams, and they have the opportunity of speaking as a team or speaking individually. So the first general question, you get 2 minutes to answer these questions. In light of the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision to overrule Roe v. Wade and Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, how does the U.S. Supreme Court precedent affect the constitutionality of the earlier Kansas Supreme Court 2019 decision in Hodes, Nassar, and Smith? Sure.
Okay, thank you. So, what you heard there is that there are all these laws on the books, and they're still going to be on the books after the Value them Both Amendment is defeated if they get their way. I will correct one thing that was said here, that we've already passed laws since this decision. The only law that we passed is a resolution to give you the right to vote in the Value them Both Amendment. But let me give you a sneak preview of what's going to happen if Value them Both fails. This is the Hodes versus Norman case from December 2021, where a Kansas court, using this decision, struck down cleanliness and safety standards for abortion clinics. Okay, we're talking things like, having to wash your utensils in a sterilizer instead of in a dishwasher, which used to happen in the state before this law. Having doors that are wide enough for a gurney for an ambulance if there's trouble, which was not in effect before. But here's one of the regulations that got struck down in this decision, using the Hodes decision that we're trying to overturn. Each licensee shall ensure that the following steps are performed if an abortion procedure results in the delivery of a newborn child. Resuscitative measures are used to support life, and the newborn child is transferred to a hospital. Resuscitative measures and the transfer to a hospital are documented. That was overturned because of this April 2019 decision. So now, if an abortion results in a newborn baby, there is no law requiring that they resuscitate that baby or take it to the hospital. There's your sneak preview of what happens next year when Planned Parenthood is no longer trying to win a vote and can start suing against all these regulations that are on the books. Don't believe the lies. This isn't a ban, but this does allow us to make reasonable limits on the practice of abortion that 99.9% of the people I talk to when I'm out knocking doors approve of.
Mr. Moderator, could you
Yes.
people, please? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, please, you'll get an opportunity to take your cards, fill out your questions, and we will, time permitting, we will make sure that they get asked. If not, they'll be forwarded by email, and you'll get an answer on the network. Mr. Burke, Mr. Chapman.
So we're asking the number one general question?
Yeah, in light of the U.S. Supreme Court's recent decision on Roe versus Wade, what's the implications on the constitutionality of the
2019 decision? Well, technically, since with the overturn of Roe v. Wade kicks it back to the states, right? So our Kansas state laws are in effect over this issue, and technically in Kansas right now, abortion is effectively illegal with the statute that declares life begins at conception and fertilization, and murder is obviously illegal in the state of Kansas. And if murder is defined as ending a life, but if life medically begins at fertilization, then abortion would be ending life, which would be murder. So it's illegal right now in Kansas. I argue that pass laws. We don't need an amendment to give that power to them. They have that power. The court can't take that power from them. We're arguing over something that the court has no authority to take from another, from the legislative branch. They don't have that authority. The branches are designed to be equal enough to clash with each other, and they should be clashing right now. Right now, you don't need to send an amendment out. You use your power. You can impeach them. You can say, under Section Article 2, Section 27, and Article 3, Section 15 of the Kansas Constitution. You can bring them up on charges of violating their constitutional oath and impeach them. And we can get different justices in there. It took 50 years for us to do that on a federal level because the legislature didn't use their power. We waited.
Thank you, Mr. Chaffee. If you could pass the microphone to Ms. Wood and Mr. Short.
Thank you. The Dobbs decision invalidated and overturned Roe v. Wade and Casey v. Planned Parenthood. And what that means is that there are no longer any federal protections for abortion. So there's nothing that the federal can do right now. There are no protections, so it goes strictly to the states. And that's why it's so important to vote no on this amendment. Because what the legislature is going to do is they're going to ban abortion, probably in all cases. And what you're going to see there then is you're not going to have any federal rights to abortion. So women in Kansas will not be able to have abortions in Kansas. And I want to correct one thing. The law that Mr. Proctor was talking about was enacted by the legislature in 2011. And it was put on hold in a temporary injunction. And in earlier 2021, we finally had a hearing after 11 years about a permanent injunction on that law. That's the one I was talking to you about that said you had to have all these procedures, so it's like an ambulatory surgical center. And you know what? The state had 11 years to gather information. They could not put forward evidence of one instance where a child wasn't resuscitated or even born alive after an abortion. They could not put forward one piece of evidence that there were any health savings effects of this law to women. So obviously doctors have to sterilize their equipment. They have to do that to maintain their medical licenses. Those are common sense things, right? So that law doesn't change it. It didn't change anything that the doctors aren't already required to do. So the law is essentially not used.
The next question, I think has pretty much been impacted by each of you. You have an opportunity to answer to it. What's the impact of the existing abortion regulations? So we're going to move on to the next question. A number of public sources have referenced the trigger law. If the value then both amendment passes, will that ban abortions in Kansas? And if there is a trigger law, please advise the audience where they can find it and read it. And we'll let them start.
Kansas does not have a trigger law ban. Unlike other states like Missouri, its neighbor, it does not have a trigger law ban. So if the amendment is to pass, what you'll see are they're going to challenge again these laws that we talked about, the ambulatory surgical center requirement, and the D&E requirements will be immediately challenged by people, and they'll argue that now those statutes should go into place. There's going to be a ton of litigation over all of this. I mean, it's going to be a free-for-all, and I'm going to be really, really busy, unfortunately, if this law passes, if the amendment passes. If the amendment does not pass, things are going to stay exactly the same way they are now. There'll be abortion allowed in Kansas with reasonable regulations.
Thank you. Representative Proctor.
So you've probably seen on my favorite place, Facebook, some folks talking about a law that was filed last session that is an abortion ban. People who are spreading that don't understand how the legislature works. Any legislator can file a bill. Anybody can submit a bill, but only a small number, something like 500 bills were filed last year, maybe 100 of them got a committee hearing, and less than those ever made it to the floor. So let's talk about some other bills that were filed that have gone nowhere. House Bill 2002 that would that calls on the federal government to abolish the Electoral College. House Bill 2666, which talks about changing the gender on driver's licenses to X. Okay? Just because you filed a bill doesn't mean that it's going to go anywhere. And so I have never even heard of this bill. Everybody talks about some secret plan to ban abortion. Well, I must have missed that meeting at the Republican caucus.
Just like to chip in, one thing I do know, many things are done to stir the pot. And they come in there in Topeka, and they are never going to go anywhere. I have personally spoken with minority leaders in the House. We are already talking about ways to deal with this in a humane and reasonable manner. We have wonderful people. I serve on the Children's and Seniors Committee, and I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, they care about our children. The people in the legislature will take this serious and will treat it in a very fair and impartial way.
Since I've kind of touched on this a little, can I kind of just clarify a few things in addition to answer this question a little bit?
Let's do that at the end.
Okay. All right, I'll try my best to say this. So, the answer is there is no trigger law. Since it was brought up by those, the ban in question, called the Kansas abortion ban, that is the piece of legislation that our organization is working on getting passed. So, you can thank us. It is true, though, it went nowhere. You know why it went nowhere? Because organizations, and I'm sorry, this is just a matter of fact, of public statement, organizations like the National Rights of Life and Kansans for Life have stated that as national and state pro-life organizations representing tens of millions of pro-life men, women, and children across the country, let us be clear, we state unequivocally that we do not support any measure seeking to criminalize or punish women, and we stand firmly opposed to include such penalties in legislation. That is, 70 pro-life organizations, including Kansans for Life, signed that letter. They signed that letter, sending it to state legislators in the case that Roe v. Wade would be overturned. So they're sending a president saying, we will never support legislation that criminalizes women for murdering their children. And obviously this is going to become the most sensitive part of this topic, is should women who get abortions be subject to criminal penalties? As I've already stated, and I think the other panelists, to be honest, should address this as well, we need to state very clearly whether or not we believe life begins at fertilization. Are they fully human or are they not? And just a matter of honesty before us all, you guys all deserve their honest answer on that. If they are fully human, then you must criminalize the act of abortion, just like you must criminalize the act of slavery, or the act of rape, or the act of pedophilia. Evils, the act themselves must be criminalized. And when you criminalize the act itself, that means all people involved in it are also subject to criminal penalties. And what you're doing is you're providing equal protection for your pre-born neighbors. That's what we're doing. We want all laws to apply equally to every person. So that legislation is our piece of legislation. And it was killed. It was killed by behind-the-door things going on by predominantly pro-life legislators and pro-life leadership. That's what's going on. Is they're signing letters saying they will never support legislation that criminalizes the act of abortion. So what are we supposed to do about trigger laws or bans? We're supposed to abolish abortion. But in order for us to abolish abortion, it's time for us not to simply merely try to do things middle of the road, not to be bipartisan on this. We need to be honest, okay? We are on different ends of the stick here. We need to recognize that and just simply abolish abortion, provide equal protection for the preborn. Thank you.
Moving on to the next question. Do you think value in both is more about eliminating or banning abortion or about overturning a state Supreme Court decision that's been legislated from the bench? Okay, go ahead, sir.
Sure. It's most certainly about limiting abortion, regulate abortion. And I'm trying to be honest. I'm really trying to not misrepresent anybody here. Kim Borchers, who's one of the spokespersons, leading spokesmen for the Kansans for Life Value Wolf Amendment, she spoke at their rally this spring saying that they want reasonable limits on abortion. That's the goal of the Value of the Wolf Amendment. That has been campaigned on for decades now by the pro-life movement. The question you have to ask yourselves is, if you believe that life begins at fertilization and abortion is murder, how do you have a reasonable limit on murder? What is that? What is that? It's inconsistent. You cannot be inconsistent in this. We need to be fair and honest about what we're trying to accomplish. Our goal, as a ministry, as an organization, as a church, as a movement, the abolition movement, our goal is to abolish abortion. I have nothing else to do with this. Let's abolish abortion, provide equal protection for our neighbors. So that is, I think this amendment is clearly the goal of it, based upon the authors themselves, is to regulate abortion. And it needs to be said, we can regulate both in the positive and negative. If we lose the GOP leadership, a majority in the House and the Senate, they can regulate it all the way up to birth. They can pass legislation saying we regulate abortions all the way up to birth. They can do that. So it's neutral in that sense. We don't need to be neutral on child murder. I think that should be pretty obvious.
Can you pass it on to Mr. Schwartz and Ms. Whitney?
As I stated, well, if it was on. As I stated before, this is a power grab. This is a chance to take away rights, freedoms, liberties. This is not about protecting or valuing them both, because only one side's being valued if we vote yes. Women's health care is important. Our state does not fund abortion. There's 3 instances: incest, rape, and medical emergencies, life endangerment. What scares me about this is the access to health care yet again. This is a real tough subject, as we all know. It's very hard to talk about because I'm not a doctor. I'm not a lawyer, I'll tell you that right now. So I can't tell you when life begins. I can't tell you the full legalities behind it. The only thing I can tell you as a citizen, just like you, reading this and learning about this, this is nothing but a power grab to take away rights. Because if they put a limit on abortion, let's say they cap it at 100, okay? The 10-year-old girl in Ohio, who here's a parent? I'm a parent, okay? Exactly. And if she's number 101 out of 100, does she have to live with that burden the rest of her life? Does she have to be traumatized the rest of her life because we put a limit on health care? No, absolutely not.
Just real quickly, this is about taking away rights, and it's about the legislature trying to overrun the judicial branch and take away the separation of powers. That's what this is about. The Kansas Supreme Court did exactly what they were supposed to do. They ruled on the constitutionality of the law using the Kansas Constitution. And they said in the opinion that they are not, it's not an abortion for all. The state can continue to regulate abortions. So the lawmakers still have their abilities, but the court did exactly what it's supposed to do, and the legislature doesn't like that. And that's one of the big things that this is about.
I read the actual decision. It sets the bar so high that no law can be passed. And they took away rights. The Kansas Supreme Court took away rights. They took away your right to regulate this industry the same way that we regulate every other industry in this state.
Okay, please. And I would like to just point out first the regulation. Clearly, it is not regulated. I know this from personal experience. I worked up here in Leavenworth County for a number of years. Child abuse. I was in Wyandotte County. I actually served papers at the old Douglas Hospital in northeast part of Kansas City, Kansas, shutting down an abortion clinic there. It was awful. There are other places that are operating without restriction. There are less regulations on these abortion clinics that are set up in some areas, I said some, not all, than there are for our veterinary clinics, and that is fact. With that being said, we have to look to all of the reasonable opportunities here to regulate this in a fair and reasonable manner. And as it was pointed out, this is going to be the checks and balances. If it passes, then it goes to the executive branch for pass or fail, depending on who's governed, and that's important. Then it goes to the judicial branch, and I guarantee you, it will result in litigation. And so the time period for this is going to be a lot longer than most people think. Abortion's not going to stop. I'm sorry for that, but that is the reasonable legal process.
That should be it. So we'll move on to the next question. And this is more, we're looking for your opinion. It is a Kansas issue. However, there is a lot of out-of-state money pouring into this issue from both sides. What are your views on the implications of that? You have 2 minutes, and you two break that however you want to. No, there's a few more questions. We have enough time to do a few. Thank you.
So yeah, what will happen in Kansas? That's the question. What will happen in Kansas if the amendment passes or not?
What's your opinion on the out-of-state money?
Out-of-state money. I don't care. Children are being murdered. Who cares who's paying for it? Who cares where they're being murdered? Again, we got to be consistent about this. Everybody's worried about the increase of abortions from Oklahoma and Texas and Missouri. Guys, I go to the abortion clinics once a month in Overland Park. We preach the gospel. We're there to help offer any service that we can. We have funds and food and transportation, housing, and parents ready to adopt these babies. I don't care where they're coming from, and I don't care where the money's coming from. I care that it ends.
Yeah, I mean, that pretty much goes for me too. I don't have much to say on that issue.
Thank you.
Just one quick comment. I understand that I think it's the New York Times recent opinion came out. I really don't care what the New York Times said. I don't live in New York City for a reason. And I really respect the rights of my district and my state. They have no right to tell us how to live in Kansas.
Elizabeth Warren is raising money to get you to vote no on the Value of Both Amendment. We had Quentin Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri, knocking doors in Kansas to talk you into voting no on the Value of Both Amendment. Because the Guttmacher Institute, which is the abortion industry's think tank, has already said that abortions are going to be going up in Kansas by 1,300% if we don't pass the Value of Both Amendment, because then they'll be able to strike down all the laws, and people from all over the Great Plains and from New York, California will be able to come here and get the most extreme abortions because they can't get them anywhere else.
Please. Thank you.
I urge you to follow the money. Follow the money where it's coming from. Church and state, right? Separation. Isn't that what we were founded on? Separation of church and state?
Please. Please.
Church and state.
Please let the panel members speak, please.
So there should be a separation of church and state, and it's not being separated. I urge you to get online and follow the money.
And I personally don't think that the money coming in from outside is going to have any impact on the vote. I think Kansans are going to make their decision. They're well-educated, intelligent people. I think they'll make their own decision. I think the money has anything to do with that. But I do think that you're not, I want to say one thing to you as far as asking for answers. Why don't you ask your state representatives if a bill that bans abortion does come in front of them, how are they going to vote? Ask them that. I encourage you to do that.
We have a period after this where, Mac, do we have questions? But the last question and the last general question before we get into the questions from the audience is, based on your position for or against the amendment, what will be your next steps if the vote does not support your position? What's next? You can start.
So, I said that I wanted you to remember two things. That this, if you want any limits on the abortion industry, you need to vote yes on the value of both amendment, and that this is not a ban. But there's another thing that I want you to remember now that you've asked the question. This is it, folks. This is it. I have the deepest sympathy for the abolition movement. A lot of my very good friends are abolitionists, and I understand where you're coming from. There's a German industrialist. His name was Oskar Schindler. Has anybody ever seen the movie Schindler's List? Okay. Their position, and I'm sorry to mock, I'm not trying to mock you, I'm just trying to characterize it in a way that I understand it. If Oskar Schindler had went to that Polish concentration camp to liberate Jews, to protect them from being gassed and burned, and they had said you could only take 1,200, which is the number he was able to save, you can't take them all. And he had said, well, if I can't save them all, I'm not saving anybody. That's where we're at, folks. If we don't pass this amendment, we are going to be an unlimited abortion state. And we are not going to be able to pass laws. And we're never going to get another bite at this apple. This is it. Look how much effort and how much money we've all put into passing the value of both amendment. I've been knocking doors since March. I'm sure Representative Johnson's been knocking doors too. This is it. If we don't do it, we are never going to get another shot at this. I will go back and I will try to pass it again, but this is it. This is our one chance to say no to unelected judges and restore our rights to regulate the abortion industry.
Repeat the question one more
I
time.
think you guys already spoke. I think it's. Didn't you address this? Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
You read that question?
Yeah. Based on your position for or against the amendment, what will be your next steps if the vote does not support your position?
The vote does not support my position. Let's see. I'm obviously going to continue to advocate for healthcare rights, choice, liberty, freedom of our Constitution.
Please.
I will do my best to fight this, and if elected, I will fight this if this does pass, and I will do my best to get it overturned. If it doesn't get overturned, then when I get elected, I can go ahead and work on other things that are crucial. That once we're past this, because this is the most crucial thing right now that's going on with us. So that's what I plan to do. Is if elected, I will fight for your rights for freedom, choice, liberties, and the unalienable right to the Constitution. That's what I want to do for you.
And I think you need to understand, as Mr. Proctor said, this is the chance. Because Kansas don't have a referendum. Regular Kansas voters can't put something on the ballot to get a constitutional amendment passed. Only the legislature can do that. And that's why the legislature has put this on the primary August 2nd vote. They were hoping that it would kind of slide by because the primary votes are usually less well attended and more voters stay home. And that's what they were hoping. If they really wanted a Democratic vote in Kansas, they would have put it on the general election where everybody could come out and vote. But they didn't.
Please. That's civil discourse.
All right, so this is a very important question. I first want to respond a little bit to Representative Proctor. I thank you for trying to represent us fairly. The idea that abolitionists are all or nothingist is an understanding confusion, but it's not an accurate one. And here's why. We understand that us individually, just like Mr. Schindler, have a responsibility to do everything in our power as civilians. But we also understand that the government has a role to do something based upon what God's word says, our Constitution says, that is to do justice. Not half justice, not partial justice, not try to be just, but be just. It's our responsibility to go and do everything else we can. That's why Christians started the Underground Railroad while they were abolitionists, saying, we're not going to fight for a few slaves, we're fighting for all the slaves. That's why us abolitionists go to the abortion clinics and fight for babies' lives. Because I know that there's only by God's providence that abolition of abortion will be achieved. But until then, I am going to do everything I can within my power that is lawful according to God's word to do that. So that's that. My final view of just what's going to happen after this amendment passes, we're going to keep doing what we're doing. We're going to keep pushing abolition legislation. Our legislation states in it that any justice who seeks to supersede it will be subject to impeachment. Because any justice who would seek to supersede a piece of legislation saying that life begins at fertilization is by definition in violation of the Constitution. And if we're not going to impeach this justice, what does it matter? We've already said that it's going to go to the courts eventually. The executive, the courts can still interpret the value of both amendment. So eventually, if you have another piece of legislation come up, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the value of both amendment. They're going to interpret it as terribly as they've already interpreted the Constitution. We can't trust them. We cannot trust a process of unelected judges who are currently determining whether or not children can live. There's no election process. I'm sure you guys would agree, we need to fight for transformation on the judicial system. But that's when you want an amendment that I'll fight with you to the bitter end on, is let's get these judges out for the better, fair process.
Thank you, Mr. Brewer. Now, I know there's a lot of emotion associated with this, and we feel stronger about one position or the other, but we also are recording this, and we are sending it out on the internet live feed, so when you all begin to clap and make all the noise, it makes it difficult for them to hear the speaker. So please, let's keep this to the speakers speaking. Thank you. All right, well, now we open the part where we're taking their questions. And because you already have the microphone, we're going to start with you. And I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit, but I think I'm getting the gist of it. If someone here is convinced or convicted by their abolitionist position, what confidence can they have that if they're now on board, that position won't stall? And I think the question, just to paraphrase, is what's next? If you fight this, then what's next? Accurate?
How much time do we answer these?
You have 2 minutes for these.
Okay, excellent question. I'm so glad that was asked. So the abolitionist movement, the reason that our organization is not just a para-organization, it is a ministry of a church, is that we are accountable to the church. As some of the founding fathers made very, very clear, separation of church and state is not what some people might believe it to be. It isn't stated anywhere in our legal governing founding documents. The right to have religious liberty is. In fact, it's historically ridiculous to say that it is not the church's right to influence what the state does. Who else is going to help influence the state to do what is moral if we abandon our basis of morality? And so this is what I can promise. This is what I can promise everyone here: that for myself and my organization, we will remain accountable to the church, not to some government agent, not to somebody with a lot of money, not to the people, but to God. And as long as God is behind it, no man can be against us. And so that's the question I have you to answer yourself today is if we're going to be on board with something, let's get behind what God is behind. And he says, do justice, do no wrong, enact laws that are equal, have equal protection, that are not equal. God says he hates unequal weights and balances. He hates it. Doesn't want us to be a little less unequal, but to be equal. And I can guarantee you, just as the founding of this very nation itself is proof, that when God's providential power is upon a people, it doesn't matter how much of the minority we are, it will be done. I can promise you this: abortion will be ended in this country. The sin of abortion will end in this country. I cannot promise you that will not happen by God's wrath. It may. We deserve that. But God will put this enemy under his foot.
The next question is directed at pro-life on this, because that was just their answer, because they had to address their position. So, this is to the pro-life speakers. Why do you think that this is Kansas' one shot at overturning votes?
We started trying to do something about this decision 3 years ago. The legislature, before I got there, tried to pass the value of both resolution to give you the right to vote on this amendment in 2020, and it failed by 4 votes. Those 4 legislators didn't return. My campaign, Tim's campaign, as he said, was about voting to give you the opportunity to vote on this amendment. I mean, so you count up all the man hours of knocking doors for us to get elected. You count all the man hours of me and my friends and volunteers that are out with me knocking doors, and then you multiply that across all 105 counties in Kansas. I was going to tell you, I'm exhausted. It's a lot of work, and I don't think we can ever raise that kind of effort again. Look at all the money we've spent on both sides. I saw a figure the other day that we were approaching something like 15 million or more that's been spent on both sides on this. This level of effort will never be replicated. I wish it would, but it will never be replicated. So if we don't pass this thing now, the odds that we're going to get another bite at that apple are very, very small.
Okay. Next question is for everybody. I'll let you guys answer this one to begin with. Abortion is often referred to as health care. Do you agree with this viewpoint? Why or why not?
Yes, absolutely, I agree with this point. Like I said earlier, I'm not a doctor, but I do agree with this point. And the reason I agree with this point is because the same procedure that's used to conduct an abortion is the same procedure to clear out a woman when she has a miscarriage. It's the same exact procedure. It's done in an OB/GYN's office. Yes, it is. I've been there with my wife when she's had one done. Thank you. So keep that in mind that this is, like I said earlier, this is about choice. I'm not a doctor. I am 100% pro-choice. I've witnessed both procedures done personally in the same room, and they are done the exact same way.
Abortion is health care. And I can tell you a couple of examples about what's going to happen if this amendment passes and you get the ban that the Value of Life Regional Director has already said is going to be one of the legislature's first considerations next session. In Missouri, there is a total ban. They had a trigger law, went into effect. And there was a young woman, and this happened just a few weeks ago. 22-year-old young woman with an ectopic pregnancy, which means she has a fertilized egg in her fallopian tube and not in her womb. They spent 6 hours trying to figure out if they could get a legal opinion as to whether they could do that procedure. An ectopic pregnancy, by the way, can result in the death of the woman. And after 6 hours, they still didn't have a decision. And so the doctor said, I don't care what the consequences are. I'm going to go ahead and do this and save this young woman's, this 22-year-old woman's life. Abortion is health care.
Mr. Burke, Mr. Chapman, please.
Yeah, I don't think abortion is health care. Ectopic pregnancy, terminating that is not legally considered abortion, so it wouldn't fall under this. I mean, I believe it's a unique life with unique DNA and scientifically alive, but it hasn't become a viable pregnancy implanted in the womb, and there's no blood flow to it, and that's my personal stance. I don't know that it's necessarily right, but I think it's interesting that the Bible says that the life is in the blood. That's the language God uses for it. That is a very rare medical condition. As far as I know, usually or always ends in death with the mother. But ending the life of an unborn child, I don't understand how that can be considered medical care. We obviously we have a problem. We divorce ourselves from the fundamental truths that our country was founded on, that are stated in the Declaration of Independence. the idea that there is a God who created us, He created life. We did not. We participate in the process, but God creates that life. He ordains it. Therefore, we or our governments don't have the authority to end it once it's begun. That's pretty much all.
Thank you. Representative Johnson. Representative Proctor.
We're going to share this real quick. When abortions become birth control, when it is their fourth and fifth abortion simply because they've chosen not to have a child, that should not be medical care. There are other avenues to prevent conception, and that has to be stopped.
Please.
So, this isn't a ban. This is not a ban. All this does is take us back to April 2019, before this disastrous Supreme Court decision robbed us of our rights to regulate the abortion industry. There weren't back alley abortions in April 2019. There weren't clothes hangers being used for abortion in 2019. We had laws that regulated abortion, but abortion was legal. And if you pass the value of the vote amendment, if you vote yes with me on August 2nd, we are just going back to April 2019, when we had common sense regulations that the vast majority of people in our district agree with on the abortion industry, just like we regulate every other industry in the state.
We both keep it legal?
Please. I've got the questions. Let me ask the questions. Okay, this question I think has already been answered. But I will raise a question to see if any of you want to address it even further. Many believe a ban is coming if value both amendment passes. What is your position? I think you all have spoken to that. Is there anyone else that would? Yes, go ahead.
Just for the sake of clarification, so there's no confusion, as much as I respect my pro-life counterparts, you need to understand that we are not supporting the same things. Like, just strategically, we're not. And I'm not being this in a critical sense, just literally, our ban is not being supported by Kansas for Life, and the Value Movement. They will not touch it. I have major issues with that, but they will not touch it. So if you're going to represent them fairly. We are the ones supporting a total ban to abolish abortion. They are not.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? When the phrase common sense limits is used, what does it mean to each of you? And Representative Johnson, if you could address that. What does common sense mean?
When I started running in 2019, I started knocking doors. I did a ballot petition to ask my neighbors if they wanted me to serve them as their state representative. I got 700 signatures, and I filed and I ran. Then when I was running, once I was on the ballot, I knocked more doors. I knocked 4,000 doors in my first election. Then during the municipal elections, I campaigned on behalf of some great candidates. One of them's here in the room and got elected. But I was out knocking on doors again. And now I'm out knocking on doors for the value of both of them. I've never met, I'm sure they're out there, it sounds like maybe a couple of them are in this room, but I've never met somebody who believes that there should be no rules concerning abortion, that it should be no holds barred, that you should be able to have an abortion 5 minutes before the baby was born. I've never met that person. Maybe they're out there, maybe they're in this room, but I've never met that person. We can all agree that there should be safety and cleanliness standards for abortion clinics. We can all agree that your door should be big enough to get an ambulance journey through in case there's a problem and you have to take the woman to the hospital. I think we can all agree that if a baby that is being aborted comes out alive, you have a responsibility to provide medical care to that baby. But that law was overturned, that regulation was overturned using this April 2019 decision. That's common sense. That's where most Kansans are. And if you want to preserve those regulations, you've got to vote yes on August 2nd for the value of both of them.
So we already know that there is legislation already and laws in place wanted to. I don't disagree that they should be cleansly. There are currently 4 abortion clinics in the state of Kansas. I don't think we've had any healthcare violations. Soon to be 5, right? It's almost 5. But I don't think we've ever had a cleanliness or a sanitary issue. Yes, whenever you perform a medical procedure, there's always a chance that it could go awry and you need an ambulance and whatnot. Those instances are very rare. But like I said, the laws that are in place, fetus is not viable after 22 weeks. That law is already in place. Children cannot get an abortion without parental consent. And if they do, then it has to be some extreme circumstance to where lawyers and judges are involved in the decisions made at a legal level. It's just common sense is out there. If you educate yourself, if you go out and read these laws, these doctors are being held accountable. These standards are there. We do not need to overturn an amendment to give our representatives the right to make 3 changes to a law. That's ridiculous, and that is uncalled for.
I think most people are for what they would call reasonable regulation of abortion. And as we said, the law that Mr. Proctor is describing, where you have to have a door big enough to get an ambulance through, is the same procedure that's performed in your gynecologist's office, where I guarantee you they don't have to have a door big enough to get an ambulance through, or a gurney through. A gurney through. They don't. So, there are other states in the nation that have that actually have the constitutional right enshrined in their constitution. Either right.
Thank you, Ms. Woody.
Okay.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Brewer.
So common sense, what does that mean? Well, again, we haven't defined some terms here very well. I don't know if we've all been as honest, and I think the panelists just owe that to everybody. When does life begin? When does the personhood of a human being, protected by the Constitution of the United States, protected by the 14th Amendment, when does that start? Because that should define our common sense approach to this. Because if that's what it is, if at the point of fertilization, this is a human being deserving the same protections you and I want, then we must be consistent. And if we're being consistent, the only common sense thing is to just protect them. Okay? Imagine asking this question in the slavery issue. It was asked. What would be a common sense restriction on slavery? That's foolish. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. The act itself was evil. You end it. That's it. It doesn't matter how much everybody agrees on it. It doesn't matter what your voter base says about it. It's evil. You end it. You don't compromise with it. You don't treat it like health care. So the idea here is that this is somehow, there's some acceptability to abortion. Every single abortion is unsafe because it kills a child. Fact. Either you agree with that or you disagree with that, but you got to take a side on that. Every abortion is unsafe. Okay, I have met the extremists. Go to the abortion clinics. Come out with us. We're going to be down there in Wichita this Saturday. Yeah, I'm sure. I've heard about that. Come down there. You will hear people walk up to you and say, "Hey, what's your name?" "My name's Jared." "Oh, okay. Well, that was my 7th abortion. I'll come back in a few weeks, and I'll dedicate my 8th to you." I eat babies for breakfast. These are the things I hear out there. They exist. All right? These are the things we hear. Don't believe me? We got video proof of it. How can we expect an industry that is making billions of dollars on the murder of children to be honest? How are they going to call why are they going to call the ambulances? Why are they going to enforce health codes? Why do they care about any of that? They have abandoned every basis of morality.
Thank you. I think this has been answered. Again, I'll raise the question. If you guys feel that you need to address it, I'll give you time to do that. If the value of them both amendment is voted yes, it is, I think it's a no. If the way it's written is if the WtP's vote is yes, will parental consent laws still remain? So I think the question is yes. Is that so? Is there anybody like to comment to that? Yes, ma'am. Ms. Whitty. Ms. Whitty's got the floor.
Do I understand the question of the value? If the amendment passes, will there still be regulation of abortion? Is that what the question is?
No, it's will parental consent laws still remain?
Okay, yes, parental consent laws will still remain. And the point I was going to make before, there are many states, other states other than Kansas, where the right to abortion is in their state constitution, either by judicial ruling or by the constitutional, it's written into the Constitution itself. And those states have not become wildly unregulated abortion states. Every one of those states continues to have reasonable regulations on abortions. Parental consent is a reasonable regulation, and the conservative Kansas Supreme Court is not going to change that.
Representative Proctor.
Okay. Parental notification. I don't think anybody in here is going to disagree with that. But I do know for a fact that there are certain agencies, including Planned Parenthood, and there are certain counselors who have been in our schools that simply override that, and the way they handle it and manipulate it, before you know it, it's all done and then it's too late. And they slide through the cracks. And we need some regulation with penalties for those that do that. As parents, you have the right to make those decisions. You must be part of it, and you shouldn't have to come out with your child after a counselor at a school or Planned Parenthood has already talked to them about those issues.
And I'll just, again, the Otis decision for April 2019. Under the strict scrutiny standard, the state faces a higher burden, one of the plaintiffs proving the infringement, regardless of degree. The government's action is presumed unconstitutional. And then the decision on this cleanliness and safety standards for abortion clinic. The court, interpreting that Supreme Court decision, said the showing required for strict scrutiny, which is now the standard, is not whether the law attempts to ensure certain results or are reasonable. Instead, the defendants must show the challenged laws further a compelling interest. They have not met their burden. So if they can't meet the burden on why you should have to have safety and cleanliness standards in an abortion clinic, that doesn't meet the strict scrutiny standard. How do you think any of these other laws are going to stand? How do you think you're stopping a teenager from exercising their fundamental right to an abortion from the April 2019 Supreme Court decision? This is it, folks. If you want any limits, you've got to vote yes.
Gentlemen?
I'm sorry, repeat the question, please.
Question was, if item both is voted yes, will a parental consent law still remain?
Yep. So, yes, they will still remain if the valuable plan is passed. The question in our position is, you shouldn't have to get consent from your parents to murder your child if it's abolished. Shouldn't even be a thing to consider. That form shouldn't exist. That law shouldn't exist. And really, this is, again, where the inconsistency comes out. And it turns into major legal issues, because when you say abortion is permissible, however you're going to codify it, you have to write that in language somehow. If it's explicit or implicit, you have to say that if they sign this form, it's okay for them to get an abortion. And so what you're saying is you're setting a legal precedent that says that it's okay under certain circumstances. That the determining factor isn't that the baby is a person alive, but that their life can be completely ripped from them just because someone signs a parental consent form. You're setting a legal precedent that is going to continue to lay a foundation that we're going to have to uproot when we finally abolish abortion. That's the thing. If you have a law, depending on how it's written, but all those laws, if they're a heartbeat bill, a pain cable bill, a parental consent bill, a healthcare facilities bill, when we abolish abortion, you have to go back in and say, okay, all those bills that permitted some abortion, we have to repeal them now to get rid of everything on the books to say that abortion must be abolished.
What about anencephalics?
Please.
You're welcome.
Put your question down, or listen up, everyone. We've got about a half an hour left. Let's give these people respect. If you have a question, submit it. If not, you can ask them to their face directly. There's people that want to hear this, so please keep whether you agree or not, keep it calm, please. Thank you.
Next question is, how many of you support House Bill 2746? This makes any attempt at abortion a level 1 felony, sending women with no criminal history to prison for more than 12 years. And I'll let you start.
So the bill numbers of our legislation was swapped at one point, so I'm not sure if that is the one that's referring to ours or not. I think it is. So what is our position on it? Our position legally, especially when we talk about the legal, like the penal code and the murder and homicide code, is that laws should apply equally. Okay? If a mother or father hires an assassin to murder their 1-week-old baby outside the womb, the same laws that are going to apply to them should apply to a mother or father who hires an abortionist to kill their child inside the womb. So whatever that looks like, equal protection under the law is what we want. We want justice, equal weights. So if that's what is applying that, then that's what we're going to support.
Real quick, that bill did not come out of committee last year. By statute, it is null and void. A new session starts. We start from scratch, and that's not even at this point an issue. What I did read about, I would not have voted for that bill, the way it was written.
I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know the answer to this question.
Any bill, I mean, you can see what's coming when you see these bills. They're out there. As I said, the regional director of the value of both, pro-value of both, pro-amendment group has said to the Republicans that one of the very first things they're going to take at this next session is a ban on abortion. So it's going to come. So do you really want folks in the legislature to be making those kinds of decisions for you and you never have any say in them? Do you want them making healthcare decisions without your say, where you have no ability to make that decision yourself? If you want somebody else deciding your future and your healthcare, then vote yes on the amendment. But if you want to protect your own rights, then you vote no.
Thank you. Everyone got an opportunity? You had more time? Did you want to speak to the issue?
Well, I'd just say that, anybody who understands how the legislature works knows that there are hundreds of bills that are filed. I had a couple friends look up the most ridiculous bills filed in the legislature that went nowhere, just like this bill. Didn't get a committee hearing, died before it ever even got a hearing. And this is just one of them. So it is a non-issue. When the biennium ends, there are no bills filed. And I must have missed the meeting where Kansas for Life told all the Republicans to get ready to pass a ban. Maybe I need to go back and check my email.
Thank you. I think this is probably somewhat of a combined question. It speaks to regulation, and I think the gist of the question is guidelines for proper conduct of abortion murder will remain right in the Constitution for years to come. What guarantee is there that this will not come back to Congress, children, and grandchildren by way of regulating that they have forced child murders?
So I'm glad this question came up because this is kind of a point of contention, I think, between two well-meaning groups that both oppose abortion. I have heard folks say, well, I'm not going to vote for value of the vote because it writes abortion into the Constitution. The Kansas Supreme Court wrote abortion into the Constitution in April 2019 when they decided that the clause about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means you have a fundamental right to an abortion. I'm going to read you exactly what will be put into the Kansas Constitution if we all vote yes on August 2nd. To the extent permitted by the Constitution of the United States, the people, through their elected representatives and state senators, may pass laws regarding abortion, including but not limited to laws that account for circumstances of pregnancy resulting from rape, incest, and the circumstances of necessity to save the life of the mother. However, at the beginning it says, The Constitution of the state of Kansas does not require government funding of abortion and does not create or secure a right to abortion. Yes, the word abortion is in there, but only to make it clear that the Kansas Constitution does not contain a right to an abortion.
Mr. Burke, Mr. Chapman, you want to address the question?
Yeah, it bothers me that the first time that the word abortion is going to appear in the Kansas Constitution is next to the word regulate, which means to make regular. It's going to create the ability to have a well-oiled machine, potentially, depending on who we have in the legislature. That shouldn't be taken lightly. Any kind of amendment to the Constitution shouldn't be taken lightly. Yeah, that would be my word, that the other side could argue that the right to a well-regulated abortion is a fundamental constitutional right. And I think they would have grounds to say that if we did pass this. There's so many better ways they could have worded this thing. It's frustrating they didn't word it better. I think I was going to say something about the common sense thing, but now I'm blanking out.
So I want to make it clear. If this constitutional amendment stated that, just simply that Kansas do not have a right to abortion, I might vote for it. I'm still not too in favor of that. I think it should go further and just simply establish equal protection. But if it simply said that, I wouldn't have a big problem with it. The Constitution of our state and our country prohibits Supreme Courts from making laws. So when we make the statement that they wrote into the Constitution, no, they didn't. They don't have the right to write anything in the Constitution. That's why we have this amendment in the first place. It's just the fact that we are giving them this authority. We're just laying down and going, okay, yeah, they made that decision. Now we got to wait 4 years to try to do anything by passing this amendment. No, we don't.
Thank you. All right, we're out of time for any of the questions that have been submitted. I think we got to a large number of them. What I would tell you is the few that we do have here will be given to the group, and they will make all efforts to get them out to the members of the panel and get responses back. So they're not going to be ignored, but we do have them and we will address them. So this brings us to the closing summaries. And you guys are the last to have to start, so we're going to give you the opportunity to start. You have 3 minutes collectively to summarize the original questions. Why should they vote yes or no on the value of both amendments? Well, yeah, each person. We'll allow each person to do that. If we have time to do that, we'll have 3 minutes.
The reason I'm voting no is because of choice, liberties, and freedoms. It's total body autonomy. Nobody should be restricted on their right, their choice. It's free will. Like I said before, there are restrictions in place. There are laws that have to be followed. There is cleanliness in our abortion clinics here in Kansas. It is healthcare. Bottom line up front. An ectopic pregnancy is healthcare. Life endangerment, as I stated before. My daughter's mother, her life, she would not be here to help me raise our daughters if it wasn't for this. This is why this is important to me, because my daughter's needed a mother, and she's here today because of this procedure, and I'm thankful for it for that reason. As I stated before, I am not pro-abortion, I am pro-choice, pro-life, or pro-liberty, and pro-Constitution. I support our Constitution, and it's an unalienable right. I yield my time.
Thank you.
I think I've made it pretty clear the reasons I think that you should vote no on this amendment. If we don't vote no on this amendment, it gives the legislature the unfettered right, unchecked right to ban abortions or to make any kind of regulation on abortion that they choose to do. So if we do this, if we vote yes on this amendment and it passes, just understand that your voice will never be heard again, and the legislatures are going to have the all of the power to pass any regulation they want, including banning abortion in cases of rape, incest, and the life of the mother. So make no mistake, if you vote yes on this, you are ceding more autonomy to a bunch of folks up in the Kansas legislature, not all of whom are going to have your best interests at heart. That's why I think it makes. That's why I'm encouraging everyone to vote no.
Thank you.
So when during my time in the Army, 25 years, I repeatedly raised my hand and swore to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And when I was honored to have your vote to serve you as your state legislator in Topeka, I raised my hand and I swore to support both the U.S. Constitution and the Kansas Constitution. I completely sympathize with those folks that say, that have said today that, the Kansas Supreme Court doesn't have the right to legislate, so just keep passing laws because you're the legislators. When I swore to support and defend the Constitution and support the Constitution of the state of Kansas, I swore to abide by its procedures. And the procedures are, we pass a law, the governor vetoes or signs. If she vetoes, we override, and then it goes to the court. The court decides if it is constitutional, but the power resides with the people. The ultimate power resides with the people. If they don't like what the Kansas Supreme Court did, they can call on us to put a amendment on the ballot to overturn what the court did. We are following that constitutional process. I know it's slow. I know it's painful. I'm the guy out there knocking on the doors. I know how much work it is to do it this way, but this is how the founders designed our system to work. This does not ban abortion. If you think there should be any limits at all in the abortion industry, you've got to vote yes on the value of oath amendment, because without it, we are going to be at the mercy of the Kansas Supreme Court and all the Kansas courts which are required to follow this April 2019 precedent. We've already watched it happen with cleanliness and safety standards in abortion clinics. All of these regulations are going to fall. Who are you going to believe? Are you going to believe the abortion industry and their allies on one side of the aisle? The abortion industry is making a fortune, and they're filling the coffers of the candidates that support their view. I haven't gotten a cent from KFL. I haven't gotten a cent from them. I've been endorsed by them, but I haven't gotten a cent from them. I'm doing this because I firmly believe that there should be some common sense regulations of the abortion industry. Most of those regulations were passed by bipartisan majorities because that's where Kansans are. I want to restore those regulations, and I want to restore your rights through us, your legislators, to regulate this industry. Please vote yes on August 2nd.
Thank you.
So I would like to thank you for being here. When I started out, I mentioned what is legal isn't always moral. And that's what we've been talking about today here is what is legal and what is moral. And you get to make a decision on that when you vote. And regardless of how you vote, it's important that you have the right to vote as citizens and not have it be determined by a judicial board such as the Federal Supreme Court or the Kansas Supreme Court. So let your vote be counted. Now, when I was in law enforcement, I tried to save the world, and I found out I couldn't always do that. And when I was working the child abuse cases, it was terrible sometimes. I just really didn't make any difference. But one day in a neighborhood not too far from here, with a court order, I went and I rescued a 3-month-old baby born of a crack mother whose other children had already been taken. It was almost a flaw pass. And I went in there, and we brought that little baby out and set it up for adoption. 3 or 4 days after we took that child out, that house burned down. That child would have died. And that was the one thing that kept me going some days, is I saved one child. And my support for the value of the Both Amendment as if I could save one child. And thank you.
Thank you.
The founding fathers set up our republic to have the three branches flashing in power and to use their power. For instance, the legislature to use their power of impeachment against the judicial branch if they outstep their bounds, or the executive if they outstep their bounds. They actually warned against appealing to the people with petitions over certain issues, and Federalists 48, 49, and 50, and they go into detail of when it had been tried. It was tried in Pennsylvania, it was tried in Virginia, and it failed, and it goes into detail. You should read it. It explains the dangers of solving issues of certain branches overstepping their bounds that way. They designed the powers in the different branches to fight against each other, not to have to appeal to the people every time. And that's the way a pure democracy handles things. And the Federalist Papers expound, painstaking detail, all the different qualities of having a pure democracy. And we have a constitutional republic for that reason. All the other democracies throughout history fail because the people ultimately end up voting themselves more money or more things, and they're moved by temporary passions and things like that. And there is a lot of fear porn being used over this amendment, and when in reality, depending on how the legislators respond to it, it's not going to change a whole lot. Because right now they have the power by the Constitution to pass laws and regulations. They have the power right now to impeach these justices that outstep their bounds, and then have the executive branch appoint new justices. It's completely unnecessary. We need our branches to use the power that they have for the people we elected them to do that. That's part of their job. It's almost like they're, trying to not do the job basically, and pass off their responsibility to the people. I encourage you to read Federalist 48, 49, and 50, and Federalist 51 is a really big one, just in general. So thanks for having me. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Well, thank you, everybody, for my other panels. This has been a great discussion. I want to reiterate one thing. Don't just vote. Do something about this. Okay, if you don't know your legislators by name and you're not setting the times to talk with them, build a relationship with them, regardless of what side you're on, to do that, you have a responsibility to do that. So make that happen. Support them and be there, get involved. So the 14th Amendment is very, very clear constitutionally that no state can deprive any person of the right to life. I've hit on this so many times, because if we don't get some of these fundamental questions answered, constitutionally, we're really just not achieving anything here. It's just purely political. We've abandoned our real basis of our founding documents. The fact of the matter is, laws simply must be just. Isaiah 10, verses 1 through Z says, "Woe to those who decree iniquitous decrees, and the writers who keep writing oppression, to turn aside the needy from justice, and to rob the poor of my people of their right, that widows may be their spoil, and that they make the fatherless their prey. What will you do on the day of punishment, and the ruin that will come from afar? To whom will you flee for help, and where will you leave your wealth?" Do not decree iniquitous decrees. And don't simply settle for something that's a little less iniquitous. Do what is just. Do what is right. Separation of powers exists in our Constitution, and we have the right to impeach these justices. Where are the calls to impeach them? Just genuinely, representatives, where are the calls to impeach these justices? They're trying to legalize child murder. There is no common sense here. They are guilty of high crimes, which is ground for impeachment. The supreme law of the land actually isn't just the people and the opinions of the people, it is the Constitution itself. That is what it states in Article 6. It is the Constitution that is the supreme law of the land. And we are a constitutional republic. We are not a pure democracy. That's why we don't just pass laws based off of a majority. That's not how we should operate. That's how the French Republic operated when it initiated at the same time around the U.S. did, and that fell apart very quickly. The reason we have had the stability as a nation we had is because we have a constitutional republic with checks and balances. And my question is, if the legislators aren't going to check the Supreme Court and say, hey, if you're going to legalize child murder based on the definitions that we hold, you're out of here. Not just give it to the people and say, hey, in 4 years, pass an amendment that allows us to continue to move around these Supreme Court justices. We shouldn't have them. The final thing I want to address is Representative Johnson talked about rescuing a child who was in a burning house. And I sympathize with that, I truly do. But my perspective is that if you have a house full of children that is burning, you don't just save one, you give your entire life, everything you have, to save all of them. And when you pass a law, or if you're governing city ordinances that could protect these children, or have safety codes or fire codes that could protect them from being burned, you don't just go with what's kind of pragmatic. You say, no, we're just going to save them all.
Thank you, Mr. Berger. Okay. You think it's clear that we have passion on the entire scale here, both in our audience and with our panel? And I think that this has just been an extraordinary gathering. It really has. I've been in this community for a number of years. To have you all sitting here and participating, and to feel the passion, then we're doing something. We the people of Leavenworth are doing something right by bringing us all together. So again, I thank you for sponsoring and organizing this event. And I want to thank the panel members. You guys did a great job representing your positions and your passion on both ends of this. So I think we owe them a round of applause. Mr. Gallagher, do you have any closing comments?
The only thing I'd like to say is I have one question that was directed towards Ms. Lee and Mr. Schwartz that's directed just to them. So the person that wrote it, they can either engage them right afterwards, or you can rephrase your question to make it something that all three of our panel groups can answer. But I'm holding it right here. The others will, did we have a few left? 6 of those will make the cut.
Matt, can I get an extension from Tuesday?
Well, we negotiated 6 questions. Only 6 will make the cut, but thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Be safe.